Hi, and thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the eSpecial Needs podcast. Before we get into anything, we're going to have kind of a meta conversation about what's to come in this episode. Just about every kid needs to be given the birds and the bees talk at some point, and for a lot of individuals with special needs, that doesn't always happen. In this episode, we're sitting down with a sex therapist named Nicholas Maio-Ather. He started an organization called Empowered, the Center for Sexuality, here in St. Louis. We talk about a lot of anatomical things, so a lot of this podcast is not necessarily safe for younger listeners. It might be more suitable to a parent listening comfortably by themselves in their car. It's kind of NSFW, not safe for work, so just keep that in mind. There's also kind of a trigger warning. We talk about some instances in which individuals with special needs have been taken advantage of. So please keep in mind as well that while the ideas expressed in this podcast are great, they do not necessarily reflect the ideas and opinions of eSpecial Needs as an organization. Thank you so much for listening. And without further ado, here's the next episode. All right, so today on the eSpecial Needs podcast, we have Nick, and he's going to talk to us about talking to your kid about sex.
Hello.
All right, hi Nick. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Nicholas Maio-Ather. I am a board-certified behavior analyst licensed in the state of Missouri. I'm also a practicing sex therapist under supervision. I am just about there for my sex therapy certification, which is not required in the state of Missouri, but I'm getting it because it's the ethical and right thing to do. And so I'm also in I'm getting my second master's right now in marriage and family therapy. So I'm a very well-rounded kind of a therapist.
So you're not just about sex?
I am just about sex.
Never mind. Don't question.
What I've noted, though, is that sex, it works its way into all components of our lives. I mean, when you look at my clients' plans, you might wonder, like, wait a minute, this is about sex? Because we're working on budgeting and we're working on, a lot of functional life skills, how to recognize the steps for entering conversations, like how to recognize what's going on in other people's social signals. We do a lot of like social skills building, a lot of things you might see in traditional ABA programs, but I'm focusing them towards building your skills and your ability to flirt or your ability to be flexible with somebody else that you have to share time with or share finances with. I'm teaching those kinds of skills. So it's the same therapies and techniques, but applying them a little bit differently.
That's super interesting. And you run an organization called Empowered.
Empowered, a Center for Sexuality.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us about that?
So we are located in Clayton. Can I plug? Am I allowed to plug?
Yeah, please plug. That's why you're here.
So we're at 8000 Bonham Avenue in Clayton, Missouri. We're in Suite 201. We can be reached at 314-932-1105. Or you can always find us at www.empoweredcenter.com. What we are is we are an intersection. I set out a few years ago with our agency's president, Jessica Naisland. I'm looking at an individual named Jason. I totally just said that.
It's okay. You're
fine. Jessica, I'm sure, would love that I just did that. So her and I set out to start the agency, and we did it at a conference where the theme was intersectionality, and people were talking about disabilities and about other minority populations, LGBTQIA, African American, Latinx. So as people were talking about all these different populations, we realized there were no therapists there. And we're in a room of some of the biggest names in therapy. None of them provided their services in the same location. it was like, you go here for sex therapy, you go there for a doula, you go there for ABA, you go there for sex education. And we wanted to create a place where people could come and get everything in one place. So we don't just focus on disability, we focus on providing sexuality services to all populations. But as a place that does provide sexuality services to people with disabilities, that does make us kind of stand out amongst disability providers. So a lot of our business is from clients with disabilities, oftentimes intellectual disability, autism, and we have also worked with Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, HIV, a variety of other disabilities.
Physical disabilities too?
So interestingly enough, aside from some that were kind of comorbid with the main reason that we were coming in, we have not. But I have worked with individuals in other locations and outside of Empowered's practice, and I am competent in working with physical disability. It's just not a market that I have broken into yet. They don't know to come to me.
You haven't had the opportunity.
There's just, yeah.
Right.
We get pretty flooded with, especially with autism. A lot of clients who didn't receive sexuality education in school. There was the hope method of like, let's hope it just doesn't happen.
But it will.
But that's it. It comes our way. And then, of course, what we would love is proactive, right? Proactive. It would be awesome if I was getting parents of 4-year-olds coming to us and saying, hey, we don't ever want an issue. What can we do to prevent it? But most of the time what we get is reactive. So, my son was engaging in or attempting to engage in flirt behaviors, and he harassed a girl, and now she's pressing charges. Those types of things are very common, and so we go in and we provide not only the guidance of like what your rights are in these situations, but then also, of course, the direct therapy and also family and parent trainings.
Amazing. So why did you name it Empowered?
So I love that you asked that.
I'm just curious.
So
it's not on the list.
We tossed around a lot of names, I think, like you do when you're starting a business. But when we could not settle on a name, a lot of them were wordy, and ours ended up becoming wordy. Empowered, a Center for Sexuality. We knew that we needed the word sex in it. We felt that if we did not do that, we were not helping normalize the fact that sex does seep into everything. But we didn't want our agency to be called like that sex place. So we needed a name that really represented what we were trying to do. And so at the heart of it, what are we trying to do? We're trying to help our clients find empowerment. And that looks different for every single client. Sometimes it looks different even than what their guardians want initially, or different than what the funders say it should be. We have all of these normative tests for autism, the ABLS, the Vineland, the VB-MAP. There's just so many of these different standardized assessments of what somebody is supposed to do, how they're supposed to behave. But when it comes down to it, how many of those behaviors really are necessary? How many of those behaviors really are normative for today's youth when they were written by people who are now 60 years old? Things like that, looking at, they should be able to balance a checkbook. I'm sorry, I'm a grown man who owns my own agency, and I don't know how to balance a checkbook. I know how to do my digital stuff. I can go into my online banking app and I can rock it. I know how to go to a bank and talk to people. That's what my clients might need to know.
Right, exactly.
So we look at what is actually normative, and we recognize then that within minority populations, there's different normative behaviors. And so that's something to look at too, is the social validity of things. If a client comes to me from a rural family, I've had rural families call me and, he needs an intervention. Well, why? He invited a transgender over. Well, don't see how that is going to warrant an intervention. I do see how there is conflict in the family right now. And this is definitely warrants a consult, right? We need to talk about like what is and isn't going to be normative moving forward if your son is attracted to trans individuals or is trans themselves. So those types of things. It's definitely an honor and a privilege to work at Empowered and to have that be the name, the first word that people think of when they think of us. So that's a cool thing.
Right. Because when I think of sex ed, I think of the Netflix show. Did you see that one?
Oh my gosh. It's amazing, and they also missed the mark. So again, looking at hope methods, right? The hope methods. And that is something to note too, is that a lot of the schools in Missouri and elsewhere throughout the United States, if they offer sex ed, oftentimes it's going to be abstinence focused. And abstinence should always be included in sex ed. I'm not saying that I'm against abstinence. It is the only absolutely 100% safe thing to do.
99%? Mary had a child. Remember that? I'm kidding. I'm sorry.
Okay. Depends on your point of view.
It's Ash Wednesday.
Okay. So in that context, recognizing, you threw me.
So yeah, I told you I talk in circles.
But
abstinence is the only 100%.
Yes.
Back it up.
Recognizing that abstinence is a crucial component, we definitely teach it. But also in recognizing that that's not what the average person does do, and that studies, ongoing multitudes of studies have shown that areas where there's abstinence-only education, we see higher rates of STIs, particularly in anuses and throats. So what happens is when we're told not to put it somewhere, we find a different place. And in behavior analysis, we would say that that is you're seeking a replacement behavior. All behavior serves a function. And if I don't have something new to serve me the function that you are blocking by telling me no, I'm going to find something new. And that's how anything works. All the way up through the animal kingdom to human beings, that's how we work. So in not providing adequate outlets or opportunities and talking about safety, we end up missing the mark. And this hits people with special needs so much because not only are they less likely to receive sex ed at all, but if they do receive it, how much of it are they actually understanding? A lot of people have decent receptive language and not the greatest expressive. The problem with that is that if you don't know how to get them to express that they have understood and you just assume, well, then you've done a disservice. Studies have been done that have shown that with sex ed in disability populations, after the sex ed was completed, there was no proof of behavioral change. And so, is sex ed good or bad for disability populations? They said, what we have seen is we've seen that it increases advocacy language, and we know that that's really good. But what we have not seen is that they can take it and apply it into the community setting. And at Empowered, we do that.
So how do you do that?
So we actually start with in-home or in-office sessions, depending on funding source and where they live. And we get wherever their baseline is, like whatever they need. Some learners need to start with pictures on a table, and we do that. Other learners are good to go from video. Other learners are good to talk about hypotheticals. If they are not ready to talk about hypotheticals, they're still at pictures on a table. We're going to work them up through to hypotheticals if that's possible with their cognitive levels. Try and get them through as much as we can. Then we move into role plays. Role plays are really, really telling. They're not fully telling And I'm going to express that that can't be the end of my intervention in ABA. So if you're a behavior analyst and you're listening to this, don't be mad at me. I'm not ending with role plays. So we do role plays, and in our role plays, we try and generalize. So we actually bring in different members of our team to come in and role play. If my client would not find any member of my team to be attractive, then what I'm going to do, because if we're role playing flirting, my client's going to have to want to get through the role play, right? And I'm going to help them build up maybe self-control that they have where, let's say they stare at the female's chest. All right, that's what they do. They stare at ladies' chests. I'm looking for that. I'm giving them a chance to practice not doing it and doing something else, a functional replacement that is rewarding for them. Well, why is it rewarding for them? Because they are attracted to her. And so it's good that she is like talking to them about this. Now, are they ever going to see her outside of those sessions? Absolutely not. She's not their staff. She's not part of their lives, and she cannot be. And same would go for he if I had a gay client, obviously, or a female client. Just happens to be the majority of my clients have been males on the autism spectrum. So we do these facilitated flirt role plays, and they're kind of neat. So I'm a certified Pierce instructor, and I do utilize, and I always give them props, but I utilize some of their methodology in terms of role plays. They came up with a really fantastic way to do it. And so the Pierce system for social skills training for teens and young adults with autism, basically they have all of these amazing role plays where they pause, and in the middle of it, all of the actors involved hold their facial expressions, they hold everything. So when we do these role plays, we do that same kind of thing where they'll be in a flirt situation. I have maybe 5 criteria that I'm looking for. I'm looking for space boundaries. I'm looking for, did he say who he was? And did that sound natural? Did he like walk up and do like a second grade, like, hi, my name's Jeff. I like bread.
My brother's name is Jeff, and that's something he would say. I'm sorry.
So if that's the case, I try to work with them on maybe a more natural introduction, how they can get that in. But I'm looking for that introduction. I'm looking for, are they talking about the person's body, or are they utilizing clues to pick up on common interests? For instance, you do have the ash on your head, right? Mm-hmm. So I know that right away, before you even told me it's Ash Wednesday, I put that together. And so I knew right away, she's Catholic. She celebrates Ash Wednesday, or observes it rather. It's not really a celebration. So this is something then that I could have talked to you about right off the bat. So I teach my clients to look for those things. What are the context clues? Teaching them, and again, this all comes from Pierce methodology, but teaching them to listen for context clues. Find those common interests. Common interests, and this again, Pierce. Common interests are the foundation of friendship. Well, friendship and relationships are not so different. Friendships are a type of relationship, and common interests really are helpful in flirting as well. Oftentimes when we hear, let's look at the Me Too movement for a moment. Many of my clients have been accused of or charged with sexual harassment. And so I'm looking at the Me Too movement, and I'm listening to these women because I'm like, I need to know how to keep my guys safe, right? What are these men doing wrong? What is it that women's voices are saying needs to happen? And so in looking at that, kind of recognizing that a lot of women don't really like it when a guy comes up and just starts to talk about their bodies. Women don't like it even when it's a compliment, and going in and starting to actually do research and finding that, yeah, there are even studies that back up this stuff. So in working with my guys, teaching them about common interests is crucial. So once they can get through these role plays and they've got the common interests and they're giving good body language and things are going smooth, we move on. But during the learning, anything that they do wrong, I pause. Pause. This came from Pierce, that whole technique. I do pause. What could be wrong with that? And then my client, who has already had initial learning, I'm not just some jerk who like throws them into quiz scenarios. They've built up to this. They're ready for it. So I asked what could be wrong with that. And then they have to figure out like what did they do wrong? And then we kind of work through that together, and I give them as little assistance as possible. I want them to figure it out. And then we problem solve in terms of like, what should you do next? Like, what could you have done differently? So then we also check in with her. So she's frozen right now. She's got this face of, shock. He just said something offensive. So she's holding it. So I'm like, as we're breaking it down, I'm like, so what could be wrong? And he's like, well, she looks scared. Well, how do you know that she's scared? Her forehead's scrunched and her lip is up and I can see her teeth, but she's not smiling and her eyes are looking off to the side. You're right. Those are 3 of the 10 signs that I taught you. So awesome. She definitely is uncomfortable right now. Do you have consent to keep speaking? No, I don't. You're right. You don't have consent to keep speaking. Her body is showing you everywhere. She might not have the voice telling you, but her body is showing you that what you're talking about is non-consensual. So what can you do moving forward? And the step I teach them is, hey, I might have said something offensive. What could we talk about instead? Or if they've really gone too far and they recognize that, then I'm so sorry. I'll leave you alone. Just getting out of there. Because that's what women want in those situations. They don't want him to sit there and start mansplaining
and
why he was doing what he was doing. And then perhaps going into a full-on meltdown because he's trying so hard. So I'm just like, if you don't have consent here, it's okay. There are other women. I know it's hard to get up the gumption and the sort of inner strength to go talk to somebody, but you did that, and that was really cool. So I always emphasize what the strengths were too, and now what to do next time. So then we go in and I say, okay, so unpause, and they have to navigate and finish it. They either backpedal a tiny bit, ask her what would be okay to talk about versus trying to mansplain, or they get out of there. And then we also do a redo. Okay, now that you know that you messed up with that, what can you do differently? Let's do it differently and see if it works. And so I always tell whoever's doing the role play, whoever's actor or actress, be yourself. And if they say something that a random stranger that you didn't know had a disability said to you, I want you to react like you feel you would react. So it's pretty cool because then we check in with them and we ask, so how did you feel during that first round? How did you feel that second round? What was different? So we are able to get a lot of perspective taking in that moment. And then we move, once they graduate from role plays, into wingman.
Wait, pause before we get there. How do you teach them in role plays to handle rejection?
Okay.
Sorry, that's because that's a hard thing for a lot of people.
That is so important. We teach alongside almost all of our interventions, we teach ACT mindfulness. And ACT mindfulness, acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT is, it's very powerful. And mindfulness is actually only one of 6 skills that are within the ACT hexaflex. But when we're teaching ACT, we teach people to learn to kind of distance themselves just a little bit from stimuli, not like blocking or running away from something that's intense, but giving yourself enough space to where you can be objective. And that's a huge skill for a lot of people. Everyone needs ACT. Okay. I went and I did like a 16-hour boot camp of learning ACT for my own life. I think ACT is it's amazing stuff. It's also the only, therapy outside of ABA that behavior analysts are allowed to practice using a behavior analytic license. And that actually says a lot because behavior analysts are the most stringent out of any therapist when it comes to empiricism and making sure that things are empirically backed. So the fact that ACT is allowed just shows how powerful it is. So we teach these clients to separate for a moment from that stimuli and kind of just let it pass through them for a moment and they find their center, and then they face that stimuli. And so handling rejection becomes easier because handling anything becomes easier. Acceptance and commitment therapy is really neat because it generalizes and starts to affect every facet of your life. Because as you accept things, you don't feel a need to fight your feelings. And we tell people it's not about being placative and just becoming this emotionless blob of like, I don't care. I'm dissonant from the rest of the world. That's not what it is. Because like I said, there's many skills within ACT. You have to face your issue and you have to take committed action. That's why it's actually called ACT instead of ACT, so that you remember the whole point is to act.
Interesting. All right. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Good segue. Can I transition back to your wingmanning stuff? Or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
So wingmanning, basically after they graduate from role plays, meaning that they master out all of my programs regarding role plays, they've met all of the targeted criteria independently. They're having good interactions regardless of who I'm bringing in. We move into the natural environment. And in the natural environment, I basically act like I'm there to hang with them. The older I get, the harder this is going to become. But I just act like I'm there to hang with them. And when there's someone there who could be a potential choice based on interests, or based on looks, because we recognize that there's multiple types of attraction, my client lets me know. And I say, okay, awesome. So, I'm going to basically come over, hang out near you, and I want you to enter in. And if you need any help, I'm just going to kind of walk over and act as though I'm your friend. And I'm going to join the conversation. I'm going to help you save face. We'll get through it together. And either way, you're going to have a positive interaction by the end of this. And we'll get out of there. And if you do this completely on your own, then awesome sauce. Everything is perfect and wonderful. And ideally, you end up with a phone number or a user handle. So we go in there and, theoretically, it would just work perfectly the first time, but it never does. So we go in and the client, goes over, engages with somebody, doesn't recognize that they're kind of moving along, or, they don't look like they're enjoying it very much. I walk over and I'm just like, oh my God, did you see this movie? I've got something in my hand that I'm like ready to talk about. I've been looking for it forever. And I just kind of start talking about this and I'm like, acknowledge the other person. And I'm like, hey, how are you? Kind of try and get talking and kind of work my way in. And I do kind of interject my way in sometimes to help them save face before things get awkward. And then there's been other times where I had a young gentleman. It was so cool. I took him to an adult coffee house. He was an adult. Took him to an adult coffee house. It's called Shameless Grounds. And we went there for polygamery, which is a game night. And so we went there so that he could meet people who were sex positive, people who would potentially want a sexual partner. He is an adult and he wanted a sexual partner more than a romantic partner. He was okay with having a romantic partner, but he definitely wanted a sexual partner. So I said, okay, this might be more your crowd. Let's go here. And so we started gaming and we met some people and everybody was involved in the conversation and it was pretty well rounded. And then I kind of took him aside. He had started to talk more to this young trans female. And so I took him aside and I just checked in with him. I was like, hey, just checking in. Are you aware she's trans? He said, yes. I said, oh, okay, cool. You're cool with that? And he said, yeah. I said, awesome. Cool. We're going to have this work then. So went back over. I kind of found a reason after a few minutes to back away from the game. I said, I really want to check out their library. They have an adult library. So I was checking out these books, Masters of Sex and whatnot. So I'm looking at these books and he's flirting. And I mean, and it looks like flirting. It does not look like harassing. And knowing this client, like, it used to very much, I mean, you could have told from across the room he was harassing. I'm 4 feet away, kind of facing away, but really looking. And his body language is casual. Her body language, casual. This looks consensual. Both of their faces, smiles. This is enjoyable. If it's casual, consensual, and enjoyable, it's flirting, not harassment. That's how I tell my clients to kind of define that difference. So in that case, he ended up getting her number. And so that was like one of those moments where you're just like, I taught how to flirt.
Yay!
That was a really good moment. And afterwards, he was so grateful and so excited. And then, a few days later, we ran into our next boundary, which was that, he had texted her so many times, 16 times in a 2-hour period. It started with like, hi, how are you? Had a great time last night. But it ended with a lot of like disparaging things about the trans community and about her. And so he sends me all these screenshots and he's like, what do I do? And I'm like, okay, well, first off, do you know what went wrong? And he's like, yes. I said, what? He said, I violated the 2-message rule. I said, okay. What's the 2-message rule? This also came from Pierce. I can't say it's my own. And he said, well, I'm only supposed to leave 2 messages, and if I haven't heard back, then they're busy, and I either just wait or move on. And I was like, okay, so you know the rule. Why weren't you able to follow it? And so we talked about how he had been feeling things that he hadn't ever felt before because he had gotten so close. And this is closer than he'd ever been. And so we talked about how ACT mindfulness could have really helped him in that situation, with that intense feeling, taking a moment, stepping back. And he was like, that would have been a perfect time to apply my skill. And I was like, you're right. So I'm going to do some damage control. Can I have permission to contact her, let her know that, like, you're working on these things, and I'm not going to tell her any of her personal business, but try and see if she won't press charges. He gave me permission to do that, and we worked through it. And I ended up working with him for a few more months and then fading. And at this point, he's had multiple girlfriends. He's not gotten into any trouble with the law. And I consider that very successful. So,
good mark of success.
Yeah, so we've had a few outcomes like that have been really, really ideal. And we have another couple of clients who are nearing those outcomes.
So I want to transition a little bit more into kind of the conversation about sex ed. So what are some differences between neurotypical sex ed and sex ed for young people that are living on the autism spectrum with Down syndrome, and et cetera?
So first, the big discrepancy is who's getting it and who's not. A lot of parents who have kids with special needs opt for no sexual education.
I don't know if you'll have any insight on this, but do you know why that would be? Or is that just the hope thing again?
So I would say some of it is hope and some of it is fear. I think that, and it's an understandable fear that parents have, that this will awaken something in their child, that it will sexualize their child, that their child will not be able to understand it. And with that one, definitely that they won't be able to understand it. Like, I could totally see that one. And I understand why parents would have those other fears. What I try and point out to parents is it's not going to awaken something in your child. Your child is still physically aging. This is going to awaken, period. So it's really about addressing it and making sure that it gets addressed in a way that they can use to better their lives. So, for instance, when I'm teaching clients sex ed, and I use comprehensive sex ed, so, my clients all have to learn about multiple sexualities. They have to learn about, everything from communication strategies all the way through to STIs, formerly called STDs. So my clients get this well-rounded education. And during that time, we don't look at cross sections of the vulva. We don't look at cross sections of the uterus. We don't look at cross sections of basically anything because those are horrifying looking. It looks like somebody cut up something, right?
Yes.
So we don't look at any of those. We don't look or take a lot of time for, say I have a young male who's gay. He very, very adamantly, he knows he's gay. He will state he is gay. His behavioral history has been gay. So there is not a real reason for him to learn everything about how to make a baby, right? He doesn't need to know all of the finer tips on baby making, which is usually what is taught in sex ed. So for this young man, sex ed is including how a baby is made, but we're not talking about, and looking at images of an egg going through a fallopian tube. He does not need to know. He's never going to be involved in that process. And even with my straight males, I'm also not teaching the particulars of this is what the egg looks like as it's latching onto the uterine wall.
You can't even see that.
Right?
So it's not even that, I feel like it's not that important.
But that's the kind of thing that gets put into sex ed. And what I want to note is that a lot of criticism for sex ed curriculums, even in neurotypical populations, is that they show these things to make sex boring and scary. So you get all of these cross sections, these really boring documentaries about things, and then you watch a bunch of slides about STIs, and that's sex.
Yeah, that's it.
So it's kind of coming from a place of fear and of telling people not to do it, where, again, recognizing behavior is going to shift. If you tell them don't do this, they're going to do something else that meets the function. We're teaching them what they need to know. And we're helping them do what they're going to do safely.
So instead of being more biologically focused, you're more behavioral focused.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Just to summarize.
Yep. They're learning practical skills in sex ed that their neurotypical peers would not when they're coming to us. And when they're going to other organizations that have made sex ed curriculum specifically for developmental disabilities. So there's Me Too is for autism only. They have an institute, I think, in Michigan. There's Planned Parenthood of New England created a curriculum. So there are some curriculums out there that do address the social components of sex and growing up. But that's rare. And it's funny that is not brought up in the neurotypical populations because they need it too.
Right. Because we still have straight guys hitting on straight girls, neurotypical all the time, and it's very uncomfortable.
Absolutely. So in working, we try to teach the social skills that go along with it and really make sure that those are in place. So, when we're teaching about menopause, if I'm teaching a person who is going to go through menopause, we're going to talk about what that's going to be like. If I'm talking about menopause to a person who is dating women and is going to potentially date a woman or be married to a woman who will go through menopause at some point in her life, we talk about what's that going to be like on your end and from her end. How can we apply these things in ways that are actually going to benefit you in your life, versus just this is how a baby's made. Don't do this or you'll get this.
Right. So how can parents exactly jump the gun, or rather start early?
Consent all day.
Teach the kids about consent?
Teaching kids about consent. Okay. One of the greatest mistakes that parents make, especially with kids with disabilities, is tickling.
Go more into that.
Okay, so tickling. I'm going to do a demonstration here because I think that you vocally will probably demonstrate to your listeners exactly.
No. Okay.
But I'm going to tickle you.
Oh, no.
But I'm going to tickle you. No. Oh, isn't that cute? Oh, you're so cute when you say no. your body is not autonomous. I get to touch it whenever I want.
Thank you for not actually tickling me.
Yeah, I wouldn't actually.
Okay,
you proved my point.
No, but I get it because it's uncomfortable for so many people.
It is. And what we teach kids when we teach them to tickle is that it's okay to hold somebody down and touch them against their consent. And
never would have thought about that. Oh my gosh.
And this is early in childhood development. So this actually becomes a foundational learning skill of dominance being something that is cute when the other person is not responding well. And this can lead to huge problems later when they try to flirt.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Interesting. Oh, my mind's been blown. All right.
So
I'm retiring.
If you want to go really early and teach about consent education, maybe start by teaching your kids why you won't tickle them without their consent and asking them for consent to tickle them.
Oh my God.
Teaching them social consent. All right. So consent to speak. If you're talking way off topic and nobody else wants to talk about it, instead of just throwing something, targeting that phrase and like throwing something over it. So the kid is saying something weird. We're talking about current events and the kid starts talking about Mario. Okay. So what do we normally do? We kind of tell the kid, come back over here to Mario, right? So with this consent component, what you would do instead is you would pause and you would say, hey, look at us right now. And you would have them look at your face. And you could say, what emotion is this? What do we feel? Teaching them feelings early on too, certainly, so that you can have this lesson. And so the kid says, you're uncomfortable. You don't like it. You're mad. Whatever. That's because you don't have consent to talk about that right now. It was unexpected. So you can help us get the conversation there. And if we're all comfortable, we'll talk about it. But right now, we were expecting to talk about this. And so, just kind of teaching those lessons really early on. Consent for borrowing, right? A lot of my clients have histories of theft. Teaching them about consent and autonomy with items. A lot of my clients have also given away a lot of their personal goods.
How do you mean?
So, they'll like me if I give them my snack.
Okay.
They'll like me if I give them my lunch money. They'll like me if I make sure my mom gives them a ride. They'll like me if I do this for them.
Okay, so it's kind of like a transactional.
Yes, when you are unable to make friends just kind of smoothly and naturally, you have to look at it in terms of transaction. And a lot of our clients do if they don't just give up. So oftentimes there's a transactional period before they give up. And so during that transactional period, it's kind of like they can be taken advantage of pretty heavily. And when we look at that, and then we look at not having sex ed, not knowing who is and isn't appropriate for touch, and wanting approval and wanting people to like you and thinking, hey, this janitor really likes me. He's having me come to the closet. Like, this is so cool. I'm getting invited to hang out finally. That's not okay. But this seems to happen over and over and over. And what you need to do proactively is teach kids about their bodies, consent for touch, who can and can't touch your bodies under which circumstances. There's a fantastic curriculum out there called Circles that very clearly kind of breaks down who can and can't touch your body in certain ways, and who you can and can't touch in certain ways. So that proactive is super important.
Yeah, so that you kind of very easily transitioned into something that I was even talking to Jason about today. And that was the idea of individuals who have not received sex education and don't know that boundary. So a lot of the times specifically in this article that was from NPR, and it was talking about how this young woman was taken advantage of and sexually abused, and she didn't know that was not normal because she had never received sex education. And in the article, it describes her as her middle name is Lynn, so they call her Lynn in the article to protect her identity. But long story short is that she said that the number one thing that can prevent individuals with mental disabilities or autism or special needs, Down syndrome, all those things, the number one thing that can prevent them from being sexually abused is to have sex education.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
That's been the conclusion of a lot of different studies done in a lot of different fields looking at sex ed. Done by teachers, done by psychologists, done by behavioralists, done by the Journal of Medicine. I mean, a lot of people have come to this conclusion. When we look statistically at abuse, and at Empowered, I want to prevent abuse, but we do get clients who have been abused, and so we look really heavily at current statistics and everything. And unfortunately, I did not bring like a list of any on me, but I can give you some rough statistics, and I can tell you that the average person is going to grow old. Okay, that one I have right off the bat. The average person is going to grow old. All right, when you are really little, you are weaker, you are more defenseless, you are at higher risk of being sexually abused. You are at less of a high risk when you are about 20 to about 60. And then you start to gain risk again because your mobility, the ability for other people to say, oh, well, she's just senile, she's just making this BS up. So for a lot of different reasons, people are more likely to be abused in early childhood and also in seniorhood. And so recognizing that when we have adults with developmental disabilities, they are going to grow old too. And even if they have no history of abuse and they indicate that, I'm not really feeling sexual, like I'm asexual, sex ed is still warranted because they're going to be older and more vulnerable. And if they have a lower cognitive level, maybe they're already highly vulnerable, right? Cognitive level is going to play in heavily to how vulnerable they are across their lifetimes. And if they don't have language, then there's a huge issue. So when we teach clients who are vocal and do talk, we use the real words for things. And we teach contextually what is socially valid. So if my client comes in and he's talking about, oral sex and he's calling it by a different name, I'm going to call it by that name and also pair it with the term oral sex. Then I'm going to repeatedly put those two together. And then I'm going to fade out what he's calling it and just call it oral sex so that in the context of my sessions, we can talk about it respectfully, but also at the same time, he recognizes I can be real and I do know what that is.
Can you just speak a little bit more to the importance of using like anatomical words?
So in using the anatomical words,
because it's not awkward.
It doesn't have to be, awkward. Especially if you start early. Right? Okay. The earlier you start, the more shame has built up, the more awkward it becomes.
Exactly.
But there's no shame if it's normative, right? So again, in starting early and teaching consent and teaching public and private, you teach about the body and encouraging body parts to become normalized. When we're doing things like, it's very normal to tell kids, do that head, shoulders, knees and toes, right? Or point to your nose, point to your ears, like all these different things. Well, why are parents not saying point to your penis? Like just throw it in there. And then, just throwing that in with the normalcy of things. If the kid's hurting and the kid's pointing towards their groin, asking, are you hurting is it your leg? Is it your butt? Is it your penis? What's hurting? So that the kid does not think like, oh, when I say penis, I get this huge upset reaction. So I'm going to use it as a bad word.
Right.
Right? Because that's the main reason people say, oh, I don't want to teach my kid that word. He's going to use it as a bad word. And he's only going to use that as a bad word if you have indicated it's a bad word.
Right. Is there like a way, though, to inform your child that word's acceptable in certain situations, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So you need to be teaching public and private, and again, consent, and you need to be incorporating and flowing all of these together. So public versus private. This is okay in this situation. Why? So I start very basic with public versus private for my lower cognitive learners. Like, we look at pictures of outdoors, pictures of outdoors, pictures of indoors, and we start talking about, what is public, what is private, and we make a very clear definition. Public, people can see. Private, people can't see. Public, people can hear. Private, people can't hear. So if they can hear or see, it is not private. And we start to really talk about that and about how to privatize things. So we talk about, like, if you need to talk in private with somebody, then you go into, maybe the next room, and you also are not going to be talking at the top of your voice when you're really upset and you're talking about the guy that you are trying to not have hear you talk about it. You need to be privatizing your volume. So we also avoid the words appropriate and inappropriate because situationally different things are appropriate or inappropriate. One of my favorite exercises when I do group workshops and I have parents, I had 67 parents in this one workshop. It was beautiful. The chaos that ensued when I asked this one question. I asked, as a group, can you please come up with 5 appropriate sexual behaviors? Chaos. Took about 15 minutes just to calm the room down. Because it started really, okay, this. And then it was like, well, no. And then I wouldn't let my kid do this, but you do it. And then so people just started going back, and then it became really clear that context is everything, and that people who don't read context well need a lot of help in understanding that context is important and learning to read context.
So for replacing the words appropriate and inappropriate, what do you use instead?
So we talk about what is effective or ineffective, what is expected, what is unexpected, what is consensual, what is non-consensual.
That's a very succinct way to... Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Holding hands. Holding hands, is that an appropriate sexual behavior? Well, some people, they said, yeah, that's super innocent. Kids do it. And then other people say, okay, but if she doesn't want it, that is not an appropriate sexual behavior. Is it always a sexual behavior? Is it a sexual behavior when a 4-year-old wants to hold another 4-year-old's hand? No, it's not. So looking at that and really recognizing that context is just everything.
We interrupt this episode of the eSpecial Needs podcast to let you know that all Sensory Hugs items on the eSpecial Needs website are now 10% off until May 20th, 2019. You can pick up a multitude of things from weighted vests to weighted blankets to compression vests and others. Just visit eSpecialNeeds.com. So you originally mentioned that most of your clients are autistic males. Do you have any insight as to why that is, or is it just a happenstance correlation?
Honestly, a large part of it, I think there's 2 huge factors. One is that it's very prevalent right now, and there's not a lot of people out there who are willing to do what I do at all. At my agency, we have 3 BCBAs. We're about to hire our 4th, so we're really excited to be growing. But if you go around to the other agencies in St. Louis and you were to ask them, can you do a sexual behavior intervention? They're going to send you to us. So that, I think, has been a big part of it, is that there's not a lot of resources available for somebody with autism regarding sexual behavior. The other thing is funding. So ABA is not autism therapy. A lot of people think ABA is autism therapy.
ABA is applied behavioral analysis, right?
That's right.
Okay, cool. I'm learning things in this field.
It's part of behavior analysis, which is a large field that was not developed for autism. And ABA even though it's one of the subcategories in itself, was also not developed for autism. Applied behavior analysis is application of the research and experimentation done in experimental applied behavior. So we apply the research and help clients apply the skills that they are learning into the natural environment. So it's kind of applied squared. We're applying research. We're making sure clients can apply their skills. That's really that's what ABA at its heart is going to be is operant conditioning and environmental variable manipulation to help them get to their goals, finding out a baseline of where they are, what their needs are, what their skills are, and then building a very specific treatment plan that's going to have steps that help them get to their goals. The thing is, funders have decided that applied behavior analysis is expensive and they don't want to pay for it. And that's fair. I understand. But at the same time, the Mental Health Parity Act actually stated that, and this is a federal act, stated that any mental health service cannot be constricted to a particular diagnosis unless it was developed specifically for that diagnosis, which means that when all of these local, and I might be in violation of contracts by saying this because I am blasting them basically, but all of the local insurance companies and MoHealthNet, when they say ABA is an autism therapy, they're lying. When they say ABA was developed to address the core deficits of autism, this is language on their websites and stuff, they're lying. This is not true. This is misinformation that keeps them from having to pay more money. ABA should be available to anybody who the behavior analyst feels would benefit from ABA. That's how we're taught in school. They don't even teach autism in behavior analysis school. Just so you know, behavior analysts are not trained in autism unless they choose it. But the insurance company will take a freshly graduated BCBA, not ask if they have anything to do with autism, and give them clients with autism. Because they think that ABA is autism therapy. So this person who maybe has no business working with clients with autism, has no coping skills themselves, but they did really good on the board exam, now has a client who's got autism and they don't know how to handle them. So this assumption that ABA is autism therapy is dangerous, and it's also preventing a myriad of other people who could be coming through my door for ABA services from accessing it because they're told, sorry, you don't have autism, you don't get ABA. And on a federal level, that's not allowed. And my clients who have fought it have gotten reimbursed for payments that we've had to collect, or we've held off sometimes and they've gotten it approved. So it is fightable because at the end of the day, it is a federal act that says that this should be applied to all populations. But yeah, I think that's part of why I'm only getting autism coming through the door for the most part. Now, we are contracted with the Department of Mental Health, and they bring us a variety of different disabilities because they have a waiver. And their waiver waives the autism diagnosis requirement to access MoHealthNet's services, Medicaid services. So the DMH MoHealthNet waiver allows clients with any disability who are receiving DMH services to access my stuff. So that's cool. And I'm really, really grateful that DMH and MoHealthNet worked that out. I just wish regular MoHealthNet was also on board with this, and that insurances in Missouri were being mandated by our governor, by mayors within cities to allow this service to people who don't just have autism.
Interesting. So it's like less of a parental push.
Yeah.
And it's more of an insurance. I would not have thought of that as the reason.
It really comes down to funding. I've had to turn, and it's so sad. Like I get clients who come to my office for HIV, and I can only do so many pro bono cases a month. I have to make a living, and there's no insurance coverage for HIV for applied behavior analysis unless they are under 21 and have autism. If they're under 21, have autism, and have HIV, then they can get ABA for their HIV care, but only if they meet all of that criteria.
Interesting.
So parents, if you want your kids to have access to applied behavior analysis services and your kid has maybe Down syndrome or cerebral palsy or a variety of anything else really, lobby, because that's the only way we're going to get this changed.
So around the time that a kid hits puberty, what signs should a parent be watching for in their child, and how can a parent overcome their own bias towards that like hope thing you were talking about earlier?
So if parents want assistance, there is assistance out there. Community support for parents with special needs is pretty powerful. And I'm not speaking as a behavior analyst. I'm speaking more as a therapist because I do wear other hats. But in going through stuff, sometimes communicating with other parents is a good way to vent. And I definitely think that parents need that resource. What I also want to emphasize, though, is that other parents might not be the best sources of information. So during this time, going to a professional would be very helpful. Also, talking about, like, at IEPs, talking about, is sex ed coming up this year? What are you doing to address that in the school? Here's what we're going to do at home. And then when it comes down to, okay, what do the parents do at home? So we offer parent trainings at Empowered, and our parent trainings, we can get them covered through insurance if the client has autism. If the client does not have autism, then we have to do them private pay. But our parent trainings are basically you come in, we talk about different curriculums, materials, resources. We show parents how to access them. For instance, things like we have a curriculum about male masturbation called Handmade Love. And then we have one for female masturbation, Fingertips. So in teaching these parents about these things and showing them where they can access resources, and also helping them learn some very basic behavioral strategies, because during puberty, what happens to almost any teen? They start becoming a little bit more rambunctious, kind of emotional, hormonal. And so we teach some basic strategies on how to get through those. If the client does become our full-on client, like they are receiving therapy from us, then we incorporate parent trainings into the therapeutic model, and we do regular parent trainings with the parents so that they can start to facilitate things better, and we can start to fade, ideally. You don't want therapy to go on forever. So some good places to check out for sure if you're looking for information. Check out the Sexuality Information Education Council of the United States, SECUS. That's online, very easy to find. It's a government-run organization, and they have just a ton of different resources available all in one place. And they also can talk about on their site, what is and isn't sort of standard sex ed, what are the sex ed standards, things like that. But we're always open to having people come in and just do, like a one-time consult or things like that, and offer parent trainings. One of the biggest trainings that we do offer is ACT intensive trainings, where somebody comes in, we do a couple of sessions, kind of heavy back to back, a few days in a row, and we do some intense ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, and that's really, really powerful, because what we end up finding is that when they have that sort of intensive ACT and they're really kind of getting it in there, they get the concepts, they start applying them, and those crazy unknowns, those what ifs, those anxieties start to be a little less overwhelming, and then it's easier to be objective. And when we're objective, it's easier to parent a child.
All right. So what about sexuality? So if, say, for example, what are some ways that parents can allow their child with special needs to safely explore and express themselves?
So, when it comes to sexuality, are you referring to like the sexuality spectrum, like sexual identities, or sexuality like in terms of being a sexual being?
Let's do both, if that's possible. I know that there's probably a lot that you want to speak to on both sides of those things. So tackle whichever one that you think is more important.
Okay, so I'm going to start by saying that 55% of individuals on the autism spectrum are on the LGBTQIA spectrum. So if you have a child with autism, it might be a good proactive thing to start learning about LGBTQIA experiences, to recognize that science has backed that you are born this way. And so in recognizing that a learner with autism is going to be oftentimes very scientific, data-driven, if they're higher functioning. And if they find out later that you have told them that they were not born this way, that this is a choice, and then later they go through it and they realize, like, I'm going through this. Am I making a choice? Is this a choice? Oh my God, why am I such a horrible person? And now we have a high risk of suicide. Who was it? The American Medical Association actually just released a statement, a full document about a study that showed that when a child's sexuality is not recognized by their family because of a religious context, the child is much more likely to commit suicide. So in recognizing that there's also high suicide rates in adults with autism, we really want to recognize this overlap of LGBTQIA and autism because these people are at very high risk for suicide later on in life. So proactively learning about what LGBTQIA identities are really like, instead of going from hearsay, going from maybe medical journals, and not looking at things from 1978, but like looking at things that are more recent. The years things that are have been published, that's relevant, that's important. There's new research happening all the time.
I was an English major. You had to set the bar. Like, I think it was 10 years max was like what you could use for research, and that is valid.
So in ABA, we try and stick with 5.
Okay.
Right. So it's one of those things where we have to recognize that we cannot at onset predetermine what a person with special needs life is going to look like. When we find out that they have a special need, we feel a need to do that for them, to protect them, to provide them with a path, and to help keep them on it. The problem is, it's very natural in human life cycle development to stop having the exact same values as your parents at some point, because you're experiencing life and you're being conditioned by the world around you, and you're going to start seeing that other things work for other people. Different people to different degrees and at different phases in their lives. But when that happens, values diverge. People form their own values. And so as parents, if we can start and say, hey, this is my set of values, and I recognize it's my set of values, and I'm going to try and instill it in my kid early on. And then also recognize as they grow older that they are going to diverge, but just role model our values versus trying to force them on others is much more effective. Modeling is powerful. It's one of the skills that we use in behavior analysis. Very, very powerful skill when it's done effectively. Allowing children with special needs to explore and express themselves. Let's talk about that for a moment. If a young person with special needs has a budding sexuality, they're in puberty, it's happening, they're going to want to engage in some sort of sexual behavior. The sexual behavior census from 2017 showed that nearly every adolescent male engages in solo sexual activity on a regular basis. When they think that they're not being held accountable to anything on these anonymous surveys, man, everybody's like, yeah, we're doing it. You go to ask them face to face, they'll say, no, I'm not. And they notice a huge discrepancy in women as well, in that face to face, it's about 63% of women, but then in self-report, when nobody is actually being held accountable and they know nobody's going to know, it's upwards of 85. So we have this huge discrepancy sort of. But what we have to do is recognize that basically almost everybody does it. And the thing is, most people don't get caught. And here's my thing. We hold this microscope over people with disabilities and we watch all of their behaviors. And so when they do normative things, we're like, oh my gosh, they did that in front of people. Or, but it's like, well, what chance do they have to do that on their own? And have they learned public and private? And have they learned consent? And do they know what they're doing? So in regard to that, making sure that they learn about it, that they learn to keep it private, that they learn to clean up after themselves.
So for parents who are riding the struggle bus, what advice would you have for them to get off it?
So the first thing I would say is to turn the struggle switch off, and that's ACT terminology, but really to accept the situation for what it is right now. If you're in it, you're in it. If it's something that you know is coming, well, then it's coming. Regardless, you need to accept that is the situation, and you need to back away from it just long enough to really think, okay, long term, what do I need this to look like? Because when we're in it, we're thinking short term. Everything is a crisis and I don't have time to think about the long term. But if we can kind of look at how what we're doing now and dealing with it now is going to help in the long term, that softens the blow a little bit. The other thing is to utilize resources. So I've already said, utilizing the community, but utilizing, especially if you can get access to applied behavior analysis services, you can go to bacb.com, and there's a thing where you can go to find a certificate. It's right there on the main page. You can go by state. It will show you the person's name. It'll show you basic information about how long they've been certified, what they specialize in, and it allows you to contact them directly through the website. Every behavior analyst is registered on there. There's also Psychology Today. If you want to find sex therapists, or if you are looking for sexuality educators or counselors or therapists, you can go to ASECT. That's AASECT.org. Additionally, if you need materials for teens, you can also check out a website called Sex Etc. It's SEXETC.com. Sex Etc. is run for teens, by teens, and is moderated by ASECT certified sexuality professionals. So it's a very kind of cool way to provide a resource to teens or youth that is more relevant maybe than what mom or dad would want to say.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in. I think you've given us a lot of nuggets of thought, a lot of food for thought, lots of things to think about. Yeah. I'm just repeating myself.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. This was fun. I learned a lot.
This was fun for me too. I'm sorry that I took you on so many tangents.
That was good.
I'm a tangent person.
There were a lot of helpful tangents in there. Thank you so much for listening to the eSpecial Needs podcast. We really appreciate your support. If you like this podcast, go ahead and share it on your social media. If you want to support us, go and follow us on all of our social medias. We can be found just about anywhere with just typing in eSpecial Needs, except for on Instagram. We're at eSpecial_needs on there. Thank you so much. We'll see you in 2 weeks when we have John Orth on to talk about IEPs.